Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, with fellow YouTubers, Facebookians. Okay, we're doing a second video today because I finally got through with my book. So
Yeah,
take
it
it
comes
away.
quicker than we had originally planned. She thought it might take her a little bit more to get through it, like tomorrow. But we got through it today. So, Jean Shepherd's In God We Trust, and All Others Pay Cash. The book that the Christmas story.
Red Ryder pellet gun.
Yes, everybody knows the Red Ryder pellet gun.
Yes, it's one of my favorite.
This, A Christmas Story with Ralphie, as we all know, is based on this book. And, in fact, on the cover you can see the Red Ryder BB gun, the radio, the glass cup, and Flash Gordon
And
book.
if you look at it right here, it says, based on the novel In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash by Jean Shepherd. Screenplay by Jean Shepherd and Lee Brown. Lee Brown being his third wife.
Yes, and Jean Shepherd passed away in 1999. They were a radio personality.
He loved ham radio.
He was part of WOD radio.
Something like that.
I think that's what it said on the Wikipedia. No, don't worry about
W War, I think.
I think it was WOD. He was in the military. The book was absolutely fantastic. And in fact, very little of it takes place in Christmas. The main overtone of the story basically has Ralphie coming back to visit his old hometown, and he runs into one of his childhood friends at a bar.
Who owns the bar?
They get reminiscing, and he has flashbacks as they reminisce. So each chapter is broken up with a little section between him and his friend Flick. And then it goes on into the story, and sometimes they'll go back to him being in New York, where he actually has the flashback from then, because it reminds him of a situation in New York that reminds him of a situation in the past, and therefore we all come back to the same thing.
And some of the stories in the book are condensed in this movie, so it's not all about it.
For instance, the Bumpus's dogs aren't in there.
Or the tongue tied to the pole or frozen to the pole isn't there.
But we know the second chapter is Duel in the Snow, where Red Ryder nails the Cleveland Street Kid, which is the story of the BB gun. The second story is, let's see, the counterfeit Secret Circle member gets the message, or the ass strikes again, which is a little orphan Annie decoder pin.
Yes, where he basically finds out it's a commercial in this, and he comes out of the bathroom because he got hit. The story is where he talks about Scut Farkus. That wasn't in the book.
Well, it was in the book, but we'll get to that. The fifth section of this was My Old Man and the Lascivious Special Award that heralded the birth of pop art, which is the leg lamp story.
That one I liked. How he went back and reminiscing.
Oh, that was a great story.
And I was thinking of that because of something. Well, I'll explain it while he's talking about it.
The seventh story is Grover Dillon, the Tasmanian Devil, which is actually the story of him and Scut Farkus from the movie. But Scut Farkus doesn't exist at all in the book. Grover Dill was the sidekick in here, to Scut Farkus, but he's actually the main bully in the book. Let's see.
Now, when it comes to some of these things, I enjoyed the stories, including the one where the guy basically leaves town at the end of the movie thing, even though where they drew in crowds and crowds and crowds.
You're talking about Leopold Doppler and the Great Orpheum Gravy Boat Riot.
Yeah, exactly. Every week you got a piece for this Great China thing. However, what I thought was interesting is how this guy here, he was 78 by the way, I want to say this guy was really a genius when he wrote it. Not because of the most of the stories, but some of it's from his childhood, and he talks about the Great Depression and how me and you and the viewers
were the penny hard
candy or the jawbreakers
and the jawbreakers and stuff. We get into a section in here where there's a story called Miss Breyfogle and the Frightening Case of the Speckle-Throated Cuckold, which has to do, frankly, with him getting a hold of a book that he shouldn't have and doing a report on it because he was in love with his teacher. But in the Christmas story, they take a section of that. When he writes the story out to the teacher on why he wants a Red Ryder BB gun, he's sitting there daydreaming about how much she will love him because of how well written it is. And well, that's not actually in the story, but he does have feelings like that towards Miss Breyfogle, and it actually does come through in a small section there from that. In fact, there's some other things in here. I can't remember. Oh, the beginning of the duel in the snow. It talks about him swearing and getting his mouth washed out with soap.
There's another part in that whole story where he goes up against Grover Dill. He says in the movie, it said his old man's weave of profanity tapestry is still hanging over the space of Lake Michigan. In the movie, it was in the book, it was Ralphie's tapestry of obscenities is still floating over Lake Michigan.
Well, it wasn't the one part when the Bumpus dog stole the turkey or whatever.
That was in the end.
Which is when he was cursing and everything.
No, it was the cursing at the old... in the movie, the old man went down to the basement and he was cursing because of the furnace.
Which actually is in the first story of this, too, the duel in the snow. However, they have the scene where he gets his mouth washed out with soap after the car broke down and they were changing a tire and he drops the nuts. And
he said, "Oh, fuck."
And then they wonder where he heard it. Well, the thing is that the mouthwash out with soap was in an early chapter where he actually got in trouble for his swearing. It was in the story Uncle Ben and the Side-Splitting Knee Slapper, or Some Words Are Loaded, where he ends up telling a friend a joke and he ends up getting in major trouble for it, but he didn't understand the joke anyway, so he didn't get in too much trouble. And then it takes apart from... what was this other one? I can't find it in here. But there's a section where they're talking about how the father has an interest in cars and the love for cars. And
he's hunting down used cars and he wants the used car problems. That's what
and the car problem actually comes from him trying to back it out of the garage and scraping the paint of the car and trying to hide it. And he manages to pull the car back in the garage, and the family doesn't notice it until later on. It might have been in the back because it was when they were talking about movies too. Because remember they went to a movie when he found it. But anyways, the entire section of what happened with the soap, the bar of soap in the mouth, was actually taken from 3 different chapters of the book and combined into one.
Don't forget the other thing is
it's a fairly clean book. Rita is talking about some swearing issues in there. The only thing that they do is they say the damn it word with God in front. And to Rita, that's like really troublesome to her, but there is no F word in there. There is no S word in there. There is no name calling, swearing, or anything. There are some kind of lewd remarks about racism, like terms like dago, etc. But they weren't referring to that term. In fact, they even make it clear, no, we're referring to the firework that has the same name, not the racist term. It's a really, really good book. Fantastic read. I read it in 3 days, and that's only because I had things to do. I'd set it down and not get back to it until I had a chance to actually read. Where, frankly, I think this one I would have sat down and read the thing straight through. Rita probably would have done the same, but she didn't start it until almost bedtime last night, and she just got so tired she couldn't read anymore, so... anyways...
A lot of them's good. I mean, I really like this a lot. The other thing I was going to say that I liked the story was... is the fishing story with the 47 crappies, and how, back then there was no... creel limit,
it was the perfect crime. It's such a short title, I didn't remember, but he committed the perfect crime by damaging the car and then putting it back into place.
Yes, and then
it got blamed on the parking lot area that he goes to, and he ended up getting them to pay $10 to take care of the car. And Ralphie was all happy.
And another one I liked is the Endless Streetcar, where the talks about a blind date, and he's on the streetcar endlessly.
A big difference in this too is the Higby scene where they're looking in the window.
It's a different name.
They were supposed to have all sorts of Snow Whites around it because Snow White was a big thing at the time of the Depression. And instead of elves that were moving them along up to see Santa and stuff, which, by the way, Gene Shepard makes an appearance in the movie when he says something about
"Hey,
"Move it,
kid,
Ain't
the
got all
line
day left."
ends here and begins there."
Yeah, he makes a guest appearance, but the elves in that were supposed to be Snow Whites, but apparently the Christmas Story, the movie, couldn't get the rights from Disney to allow them to have
But
Snow
they
Whites.
did get the rights for...
Or they figured that people nowadays wouldn't understand why it was Snow White instead of an elf. And they didn't want to take the time to explain.
and the other thing in it, besides the Snow White, was they changed the Snow White... Oh, here's the thing I was going to say about the movie.
Oh.
They changed the Snow White thing, the biggest thing at the time, because they couldn't get the copyright, so they used the Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz was mentioned in here.
Yes, but in
Several
this, they
times,
made this...
and including that scene.
Well,
He talked about it looking like the Emerald City.
Yes,
Yeah.
but when he was doing the Christmas Story, and they had the scene where he's in the Higbees, the Wizard of Oz makes appearance. Then when he's doing the thing with the Santa, and the parade, and she's like, "Oh, Santa,
And the World's
Santa."
Fair, they brought up the Oz too.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is in the
It's okay, keep going.
what do you call it? The Wizard of Oz was in on the parade part in the movie because they could use the Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
They couldn't use the other. I think
Which,
Warner
actually,
Brothers.
that's a major discrepancy in it because the story was written by L. Frank Baum, and the movie wasn't made until after the Depression. Because, remember, it was one of the first in color, so it was made, 1950-something? I don't remember the year that The Wizard of Oz actually came out. You could probably click here and find out. And it'll even tell you
What, this one?
Yeah,
Writings?
Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It was written in 1900, but it doesn't tell when it was turned into a movie.
I can click on it. You just continue talking.
So, anyways, the fact of the matter is that when we watched the movie, they had the Dorothy and stuff strutting down the street, and they do the same outfits as the TV movie, but which was 1939, just a little later. So it came out August 25th, 1939. At the time that this was supposed to be written, I don't think The Wizard of Oz was actually out.
1937 for...
So this actually took place right at the same time. Snow White came out 37, Wizard of Oz 39. So I guess we could have to figure out that the story takes place about 1939. They talk about the Great Depression too. So I guess 1940 was right near the end of it.
Something like that.
So, a lot of people, though, this is something that I thought was interesting. A lot of people think that he fabricated his stories, but actually reading them, they're all realistic. I mean, the whole idea with Grover Diller in the movie Scut Farkus and losing control because of a bully just pummeling you every day and you finally had enough and you just wail off on him, it's happened to me. So, yeah, that's probably true. The going and getting jawbreakers and having the guy say, "Hey, you're buying up all the black jawbreakers and I'm stuck with tons of these red ones. Now you got to buy one of each or I'm not going to sell them to you." That was probably a likely thing. In fact, there's a story in here about how on the 4th of July they're throwing dynamite for fireworks and they're cutting them up. But where do you think we got the idea for M100s, M1000s, H1000s, whatever, M80s? They're partial
just to
sticks
share
of dynamite.
with you,
so,
the Great Depression started in 1929, September 4th, when The stock market crash. It went till 1939 or
So
1940.
this is right at the end of the Great Depression. And when it comes to a Red Ryder BB gun, almost every boy I knew wanted a pellet gun when they were a little kid. And some parents would actually go and get them as kids one. Is it likely it happened? More than likely. I could see that happening.
I just gotta say from the movie, it was the greatest Christmas present that I received or that I would ever receive.
And in the movie, it doesn't explain it, but you remember how his brother gets a Zeppelin and he's hugging it and stuff?
Ralphie
was the one who bought it for him. And the interesting thing is, in the movie, they open the gifts in the morning, but in the book, they open them at night.
Christmas
and they sleep
Eve.
with them during the night, so that in the morning, he's all excited to go shoot with it, and that's when he ends up, having the recoil that ends up knocking down the icicle and hits him in the eye.
No. What happened was in the book and in the movie, he's aiming it to the daisy target. The BB ricochets, hitting his eye, causing him to bleed, and it was only about, if it went like maybe a half inch to 6 inches or so, it's in the book, it would have pierced his eye
That
instead.
was probably unlikely, because had he actually fired at a target, it would have stuck on the target, and if it was at something metal that was taped behind it, BBs, when they hit metal, usually don't go bouncing 1,000 miles away. They tend to drop to the
Well,
ground
let's
and roll.
just, we don't
So,
know.
more than likely, he was standing under an awning, and his mom even thought it was an icicle. He probably had a bit of recoil from it, or whatever, and ended up hitting an
Udermo.
icicle.
See, here's little Udermo.
Yep, he wants to join in on the conversation.
You're not a Christmas dog. And there's Mapamo.
But most of the stories in here, for the most part, are probably 100% accurate and honest. I don't see as any of it's fabricated, and the parts of the story where he talks about his adult life, you actually find out that Gene Shepard did do the things that Ralphie did. Where he worked, what he did for a living. It's pretty much what Gene Shepard did.
Yeah, he talked in
the
here about
military
being...
time.
He talked about being in the Signal Corps. He was in the Signal Corps. Ralphie was in the Signal Corps.
Gene Shepard played the sousaphone. Ralphie played the sousaphone. They grew up around the same time frame. It's more than likely that he just wrote it about himself and his own experiences.
Changed his name.
I mean, heck, he talks about a fishing hole that's all murky and disgusting and basically full of pond scum and stuff. Hey, I fished a place where I could catch a fish with 2 heads. It was next to a filtration plant back in Ohio where it had sludge water runoff from the filtration plant. It was thick, disgusting. The slime on the top from all the, what do you call that stuff? The algae was just nasty and thick, and it stank. Yet it was one of the best places for a kid to go fishing because you didn't need a license there. No one else could get there, really. And the fish bit at anything, even though they were only that big.
Frylings, as they call them.
And technically you'd get chased off by the city dump workers if they saw you back there, but it wasn't a place that most people went fishing, and so we went there quite a bit, and we never ate what we caught. We usually did pranks with them, taking them and throwing them in somebody's backseat of their car so they'd stink up. And
So you killed little fishes just for fun.
They were already deformed. Some of them were even blind. Heck, at one time I was sitting there and watching over the side of a pool, and there's this little turtle there, and there was, in the water, you could see this fish just swimming in circles. And I was like, what is with that fish? So I dumped something in the water, and it just keeps swimming in circles. So I tried to move the line in front of it, and it bumped it, and it turned around and ate it. And I pulled it out. It had no eyes. No eyes at all. So I took it and tossed it back in, and it just went back to swimming in circles. How it survived, I don't know. I would not trust eating any fish out of that water. So his story, not that surprising. It actually is totally possible. I've had similar experiences to almost everything in this book. So
yes, I was thinking about my childhood the other day, you know, how everyone, in my opinion, should write about their childhood and put it in a book. Even if it's boring, it might be an interesting read, just like this guy. Apparently this guy
is a fantastic writer. His descriptions of everything is spot on.
Let
you
me
can
just
actually
say,
sit there and feel like you're living it, and heck, you even hear Ralphie's voice in the narrator's
Oh,
voice while reading.
Gene Shepard is the narrator for this movie.
He's the narrator too. So you can honestly sit there and hear him while reading the book. It is a fantastic read. I recommend you read it.
I
Take
just
it out of
wanted
your
to
library.
say this book is
I
fantastic.
plan to buy it and put it in my library.
Put it in my library. This book here, in my opinion, was more enjoyable. No offense, I'm gonna get something real quick.
Then the river runs through it.
River runs through it, right?
The river runs through it. Had no chapters, and it was just basically a giant run-on story that.
Yes, the
wasn't
guy
very good.
basically had like 106 pages of no chapters, just crammed it all into it, and like in a book like this, and then expected us to read it. This book was enjoyable. The guy put it
one
together.
thing I loved about this too, between the movie and the book, people are always sitting there saying the book was so much better. The movie took away from it, and the movie did this, and the movie did that. Actually, in this case, the movie complements to the point that you're sitting there, well, where does this come into play? I want to read about that. And you're sitting there reading it, and it's like, when's that? When's that? Hey, I haven't seen these yet. And so you just keep reading and reading. And you're trying to wait until all the pieces come together, because almost everything in there is in this somewhere. And they did a great job of condensing it all into one story. Because frankly it is. Yeah, the assessor thing doesn't come up, and the Decameron doesn't come up.
I thought the assessor thing was good because it made us learn something about assessors too. I mean, it's something
the
you don't...
movie theater part with the kitchenware, that didn't really come up in the movie at all. Heck, the movie theater itself didn't come up, and they talked about it several times in several different places. You know, and they never used any of his flashback moment of going back to town and talking to Flick in the bar. So there's a lot of things in the book that aren't in the movie, but a lot of the book is condensed into the movie, and there's very few things in the movie that aren't in the book. So I gotta say that the two go hand in hand and complement each other to the point that both are fantastic. So if you're a fan of The Christmas Story, get the book. If you're a fan of reading and you didn't like The Christmas Story much, but it was okay, get the book. And if you hated The Christmas Story, you might like it after reading the book.
I actually wanted to say what I enjoyed the most in my own enjoyable time of the book was, and a lot of people say, oh, well, we live in a nice life now. Problem is, back then, this kid actually had to go out. They talked about the weather being like 50 feet of snow, you know, and you didn't hear, oh, well,
and the
3
kids
foot
didn't
of snow.
complain. They went to school anyways, breathing heavy and bundled up, and they still went.
Yeah.
And yet they still had other things to worry about on their way, like the Grover Dills or Scott Farkases, etc.
The other thing I wanted to say is, listening to the guy's story about the Great Depression and how the old man always had a job, and how, you know, they talked about going to the movie weekly, you know, and he talks about the 40 cent, you know, or the story where the guy at the movie theater was giving away $1,700, but the guy wasn't,
well, it never got one, and then he ended up having to vanish because of something, but
we'll
let you read about that. However, not to give anything away, because it really doesn't, some people wonder about the title, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash.
It's a sign at the end of the book.
At the end of the story, on the very last page, Ralphie's walking out of the bar from Flick and looks up and sees a sign that says, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, and he says, exactly. And the point of that is, well, we trust God to pay his bills later, but anybody else, they're going to have to pay cash because there's no credit for you here. And so it's really an issue of, you know, paying cash for things and buying things at face value. You pay for it and, you know, it's yours. But if you just want it and pay for it later, well, unless you're God, shouldn't work that way.
But it also talks about in the story how Ralphie's got a diner's card and the credit cards and expense accounts.
Because he's become very wealthy.
Yes.
Which I think that's a little bit of a fabrication on Gene Shepard, because I don't think he was that wealthy at the end. Maybe well off, but not wealthy, like patent leather shoes.
He was well in 1982.
He made tons of money, so... But at the time he wrote this, which was like
Oh,
66
I know.
or something.
I know what I was gonna say about this book. Also, what I also enjoyed with Gene Shepard's book was the fact that he talks about the old transistor radio, the old tube one, you know, and
I love all the old cars in there and stuff. I was looking a lot of them up online as I was reading them, and I was like, wow, I really like that car. You know, it's like, you know, I never heard of these brands before. And so it's just, there's a lot of history in there. So if you like Depression era history or anything in the Depression area, this would be very good for you too. So,
my mom used to say
it's a no-fail book.
My
Enjoy
mom
it.
used to say about the Depression, and before TV came about, that the people that did the radio shows before TV every night, like Little Orphan Annie, they should have had a DVD or a music CD compilation of all those radio shows combined on disc, so you can listen to them again for people that want to listen to them.
There's so many of them you tuned in every night for half an hour.
Yes, I know.
It went on for 7, 10, 20 years, half an hour a night. It'd be really hard to keep those records straight. In fact, many of them weren't recorded.
Anyways, are we done?
Yeah.
Alright, everyone. This is a long video. Now you got 2 this week. This one is very good. So my last words is, if you haven't read this, go to your library or go online to Amazon. It's about $6 on Amazon. You won't be disappointed. I was disappointed, and a river runs through it, but that was just me. So for all of you out there, take my recommendations. Go buy the book or go borrow it. I borrowed it first. I borrowed it at the library, and the story goes, before I log off, I was looking for fly fishing stuff, and this came up in their suggestion box, right there on the front page. So I thought, you know, I'm going to read this. I got the library to transfer it to another library, and I read it. So it was a very good read. Aaron, on the other hand, he glanced through it, and he says, oh, I'm going to read it. And I said, go ahead, go do it first. I was finishing up something else. So with that said, please add and subscribe. Please post comments in the box. Please add suggestions. And please comment. May God bless the USA. May God bless the world.